Okay, so imagine this. What if the answer to more sustainable farming has been, like, right under our noses this whole time?
Well, it's certainly an intriguing thought, and there's a brand new research article out today, and it digs into that very idea.
Yeah. Today, we're diving into this super cool research paper. It came out literally today. Can you believe it? And it's all about native Mexican maize varieties, corn.
Right, and it looks at their potential, how these specific types of corn could actually change the way we think about using, nitrogen fertilizer.
Exactly. And this isn't some stuffy lab experiment either. We're talking Tecamachalco, Mexico. They use native maize varieties with totally unique genetics. White, blue, red corn. I mean, who knew there were so many colors? But more importantly, what did they find out about all this colorful corn?
So before we get into the nitty-gritty, we've got to talk nitrogen.
Okay, nitrogen 101. Hit me.
So in the simplest terms, nitrogen is absolutely essential for plant growth. Like we're talking building block of life essential. It's a key part of DNA and chlorophyll, which is what allows plants to photosynthesize.
Right, gotta have that chlorophyll for that green, gotta have that photosynthesis to, make energy from sunlight. It's all connected.
Exactly. And when those plants aren't getting enough nitrogen from the soil, that's where farmers often turn to nitrogen-based fertilizers.
Makes sense. Give them a boost, right? But I'm sensing a but here. I mean, there's got to be a downside. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this whole conversation, right?
You hit the nail on the head. While nitrogen is like absolutely crucial for plant growth, overusing those fertilizers, that's where we run into problems, big problems.
Okay, so less is more in this case. But how did the researchers actually study these native corn varieties? What did they do? Just plant them in a field and see what happened?
Not quite. They used a technique called hydroponics.
Hydroponics. Now, that sounds familiar, but give me a little refresher.
So instead of growing the seedlings in soil, hydroponics means they're grown in this special nutrient solution. Think of it like,
Like a plant spa.
exactly, a plant spa.
Yeah.
And the researchers, they get to control precisely what those plants are exposed to.
So, a carefully crafted diet for these baby corn plants.
Exactly. And in this case, the focus was on nitrogen levels, of course.
Right, makes sense. So what they do, just give some plants a ton of nitrogen and some, like, none at all.
So they tested two different levels. There was a standard level, let's call it like, 100%, and then a much lower level, about 10% of that.
Okay, so a real test to see how these different corn varieties handle stress.
Right. They wanted to see how four different types of maize would respond.
Four.
Yeah, one was your typical, what we call an improved variety, kind of your standard commercial corn. And then the other three were those native varieties we talked about, the white, blue, and red corn.
A real showdown. They're up-and-comer versus the old pros.
Mhm.
So what happened? Did they just, like, measure how tall the plants got or something?
They definitely looked at growth, measuring height and weight. But one of the most interesting things they analyzed was the root architecture. So basically how extensive and developed the root systems were for each variety.
Okay, so root architecture. Why is that so important, especially when we're talking about nitrogen and how efficiently these plants use it?
Think of a plant's roots like, its lifeline, basically. The bigger and more complex that root system is, the better that plant's going to be at extracting all the good stuff from the soil, things like water and, of course, nitrogen. And what they found in this study was that these native maize varieties were like chameleons.
Chameleons, huh?
Yeah, their root systems could actually adapt based on how much nitrogen was available. More nitrogen, different root structure. Less nitrogen, they'd adjust again.
So they weren't just growing, they were strategizing down there. That's wild.
Right.
But what did that adaptation actually look like? Give me the visual.
Okay, so some of the seedlings, the ones growing with that lower 10% nitrogen level, some of them just skip developing what are called crown roots altogether.
Crown roots. Okay, now you're going to have to back that up a bit. What are crown roots, and why does it matter if they're there or not?
Right. Good point. So crown roots, those are specific roots that actually come out of the plant stem above the ground, not just down below.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they're super important for pulling in water and nutrients, especially nitrogen. So the fact that these native varieties can be like, nope, no crown roots for us this time and still make it work, that's pretty amazing.
It's like they knew they wouldn't get a good return on their investment, so they pivoted. I mean, that's got to be significant for, thinking about sustainable agriculture and all. But can you help me connect the dots here? Why is this root adaptation such a game changer?
Well, think of it this way. You've got two kids and only one small pizza.
Oh.
One kid's super picky, won't touch the crust, only wants the pepperoni. The other kid, they'll eat anything. Which one's going to be more satisfied at the end of that meal?
The one who eats anything, obviously. Okay, I'm seeing where you're going with this.
Exactly. It's about resourcefulness. That kid who eats anything, they're like our native corn. They've adapted to thrive even when resources, like nitrogen, are limited. And that's exactly what we need in sustainable agriculture.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. So these native varieties aren't being picky, they're being efficient, which, when you're talking about using less fertilizer, is a good thing. So, like, say I'm at this big meeting on sustainable agriculture and nitrogen efficiency comes up. What's my go-to response now?
You could totally drop some knowledge and be like, well, actually, native maize varieties might have some answers. This study shows that these varieties are amazingly good at utilizing nitrogen, even when it's in short supply. They don't need the same level of high nitrogen fertilizer that a lot of modern corn varieties depend on.
Less is more, just like we were saying. They figured out how to do more with less, which, let's be real, is what we need on a planet facing climate change and all these resource challenges. But how does that efficiency actually work on a practical level? What's going on there?
Goes back to those amazing root systems we were talking about. Remember how they change depending on the nitrogen levels? These native varieties basically evolved to be expert miners, but instead of digging for gold, they're mining the soil for nutrients.
So they're growing longer roots to explore more ground, or maybe changing the types of roots they're growing.
You got it. They're masters of adaptation.
Yeah.
And because they're so adaptable, they don't need as much help from us, from fertilizers, to reach their full potential.
Which is good for the environment, good for the farmers, good for all of us, really.
100%. It's all about finding that sweet spot between high productivity and sustainability. And this research, it's telling us that these native maize varieties could hold the key to doing just that.
It's crazy how much we can learn from these plants, you know? They've been around for centuries, thriving in all sorts of conditions. It's like they've got all this wisdom encoded in their genes.
It's true. And, this isn't just some isolated study either. There's a ton of research happening right now looking at how both native and ancient crops can make agriculture more sustainable.
Really? Like what? Give me an example. What else are researchers finding out there?
Okay, so there was this study published just last year. It was in Nature Plants, and they found that certain varieties of ancient wheat, they were incredible at growing in low phosphorus soils.
Whoa, so it's not just nitrogen. These ancient crops, they've adapted to all sorts of resource limitations.
Absolutely. And that brings up a really important point. Our maize research with the nitrogen, it's just one piece of a much bigger, more complex puzzle.
A puzzle where if we can crack the code, understand the secrets of these ancient crops, who knows what we could achieve? I mean, what if by studying these amazing adaptations, we could develop brand new, super sustainable food crops for the future?
Well, that would be incredible, wouldn't it?
It's like we've stumbled onto this hidden treasure trove of genetic information, right? And these native maize varieties are like, hey, over here, we've got some of the answers.
And the most exciting part is this isn't just some pie-in-the-sky idea. We can take this research and actually do something with it. Imagine if scientists could identify the exact genes that let those native varieties thrive without all that nitrogen.
It'd be like deciphering their genetic code. And once we have that information, then what? What could we do with it?
That's where things get really interesting. We could potentially take those beneficial genes and breed them into other corn varieties, even the commercial varieties that need all that fertilizer right now.
So we could engineer corn that's just as productive, but way easier on the environment. That'd be huge. Not just for, saving the planet, but for farmers' bottom lines too.
Exactly. Think about it. Lower costs, less risk of polluting our water, a lighter footprint overall. It's a win-win for everybody.
And it all started with these colorful corn varieties from Mexico. Just goes to show, nature often has the answers if we just know where to look.
Absolutely. This research drives home a really important point. Protecting genetic diversity is essential, especially when it comes to the future of our food. These native varieties, they've got these unique adaptations, like genetic keys that could help us solve some of the biggest challenges facing agriculture today.
It's like having a whole library of solutions, right? Encoded right there in the DNA of these plants. Amazing. This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to the potential here.
And this is just the beginning. Imagine what we could discover if we take this same curiosity, this deep dive approach, and apply it to other ancient crops. There's so many more solutions out there just waiting to be uncovered.
I love that. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the incredible world of native maize and nitrogen efficiency. Huge thanks to our expert for breaking down this fascinating research.
Happy to be here.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next time with another captivating topic. Until then, keep those brains engaged and never stop asking questions.